Council of Paradise Valley School District, and I have Francine Sumner here with me today. Frances is going to be speaking to us today about her new organization called The Kid in the Corner, and not The Kid in the Corner, Kid in the Corner. And we're going to have a fun activity as well. But with that, I want to turn it over to Frances and tell her thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. My name is Francine Sumner, and I am with Kid in the Corner. This presentation is for adults only. So these are my three children, Jacob, Zachary, and Gabrielle. Jacob is 24 years old. He is here in Arizona and working for a company at a hotel called Andaz. It's a Hyatt company, and he's working at a scratch kitchen, doing some learning from a great chef. My daughter, Gabrielle, is 22 actually. She is a senior at ASU, finishing up her finance degree, and she'll be graduating in May. And in the middle is my son, Zachary, who would be a senior at Horizon High School this year, graduating in May, but he took his life when he was 16 at the end of his sophomore year. And I'm going to tell you a bit about his story and what happened to us, and then how Kid in the Corner was born. So Zachary was really, up until the beginning of his sophomore year, he was really your typical kid. He was extremely kind. He was one of the kindest people I've ever known. He had a love of animals. He had a love of kids with disabilities. His best friend all through elementary school was a child with autism. And he was always in the same class as this child. Every Friday we'd go to the dollar store to buy things for this kid so that the next week, Zachary could motivate him to do well and listen and behave and stuff like that. He was always the kid who made welcome baskets for the neighbors that moved into the neighborhood. He just was a kind kid. He always got homework. He always reached out to his friends. He just was one of those really extraordinarily kind kids, which came back to kind of bite him in the end because he couldn't understand why other people weren't like that. He loved golf. He loved animals. He was an entrepreneur. He had businesses since he was probably 8 years old. He never lost a game of Monopoly. He was gifted. He had a lot of great qualities. He was just a really typical kid, but we discovered at the end of his sophomore year, or at the beginning of his sophomore year, he suffered from mental illness. So his very first breakdown that I remember was in December of 2016. My daughter, it was the night before his last final, my daughter was getting ready to go on a birthright trip to Israel. And so her clothes were strewn all over my bed. They were actually leaving the next day to go to California to see their dad, and then from there she was going to Israel. She'd never been out of the country, she was having anxiety, her clothes were everywhere, she didn't know what to bring, and I'm trying to help her pack. And Zach walks in, and he sprawls over my bed, and he said, "I need help studying for my final right now." And, Gabrielle was like, "Get off my clothes," and Mom's helping me, and, and I said, "Just relax, go finish doing what you're doing, and as soon as I'm done with her, I'll come help you." And he got up, and he stormed across the house to his room, and he slammed the door. And I got a text this long, in all caps, about how he knows I don't love him. I've never loved him. I favor Gabrielle. There's nothing that I could say that will convince him otherwise, and don't come help me. Don't come talk to me, because I'm not going to answer you. So I'd never gotten a text like that from him before. So I said to her, "You better finish packing. Let me go see what he needs." And I went across the house, and I knocked on his door, and he said, "Go away. I do not want anything to do with you." And I said, "I'm not going anywhere. I'm here to help you. Come on out. Let's study. What do you need help with?" And silence. Just silence. And I sat down with my back against his door and said, "I'm going to sit right here until you come out. I'm just going to sit here for as long as you need me to, until you're ready." And nothing, silence. Every few minutes, or 10, 15 minutes, I'd knock, nothing at all. And then, I don't know if he heard me, but I started to kind of silently cry. I started to realize something's not right. I've never experienced this before. I know what's going on. I couldn't get him to come out. The door was locked. And then about 45 minutes into it, I heard a crash, and that was his first attempt at suicide. He came out of that room, hysterical crying, and said to me, I don't know what's wrong with me, Mom, but why do I care so much about other people and nobody cares about me? And I thought, oh my God. So we went into my room and we kind of lay down on the bed and we talked for a while, and all kinds of things started coming out. And it turned out that he'd been sitting alone in the media center having lunch for the last 3 months. His friends that he'd had all through elementary school, middle school, and now high school, all sat together all the time, and they're boys. And they would ridicule each other, chide each other, tease each other. And at one point, he was the kind of the butt of their jokes, and he took it really personally, and got very upset, and never went back to have lunch with them. He'd been sitting by himself for 3 months. I had no idea. Nobody that was sitting in the media center noticed it. None of his friends said anything. Nothing. I had no idea. And he just became unglued. And I really remember sitting there thinking, I have no idea what to do. If he broke his leg, I would know exactly what to do. But I really didn't know what to do. I had no idea who to call, how to handle it, what should I do with him. So the next day he got up and he decided he was going to school, he wanted to finish his finals. For the first time ever, he cheated on a final that day, got caught. He was just a mess. He was just unraveled. And when he came home from school that day, he and my other two were supposed to get in the car now and go to California. Do I send him? Don't I send him? What do I do? I honestly didn't know what to do. He wanted to go, so I let him go. He went to California, had a terrible time, came back worse, and couldn't leave my side. He was at such a low that I literally could not take the trash out without him coming with me. He could not leave my side. He moved into my room. He was terribly low. So, I reached out to friends, pediatricians, other friends that I knew to figure out where to take him. What do I do now? And I had a pretty highly recommended psychiatric provider that I called and couldn't get into until May. So this is December, could not get an appointment until May. Had people that knew her personally, couldn't pull the strings to get her in, to get him in until May. So what do you do? I couldn't wait till May, right? So we finally, after calling contacts and people that I knew or reached out to, I finally got him an appointment with a not in-network psychiatrist because he needed to go somewhere. That was $600 for the first visit. And, but what are you gonna do? So we went, they put him on medication. We had to go every week, so that was $400 a week. And we had him on a medication that wasn't really doing him any good. And he was getting worse. And the psychiatrist at that point felt he really needed to go into the hospital. So into the hospital we went. We went to Banner Behavioral. He sat in scrubs in a recliner chair for 48 hours because they didn't have beds. The psychiatrist that brought him into the hospital, they sever that relationship once they're in the hospital, right? Now they have to see the provider in the hospital, so he's now on provider number 2. This is beginning of February. They put him on, they changed his medication. As we all know, SSRIs or antidepressants take way more than 2 weeks to build into your system, but insurance will only keep him in the hospital for 2 weeks. He still felt low. He felt like people didn't care about him. He was in the hospital. They were asking him if he had a suicide plan, and he said, I know exactly what I could do with these chairs in my room. I really would like you to get the chairs out of my room. So they take the chairs out of the room, and the shift changes, and they put the chairs back in the room. And he feels like nobody's listening to me. No matter where I go, nobody cares. Nobody's listening. So finally, 2 weeks later, he felt like he was ready to come out of the hospital. And we finally found a provider that was in network. So we had that appointment for March, because they don't let you go unless you have, an appointment. And of course, the doctor that's in the hospital doesn't come out with you, so now he's on provider number 3. So we go to provider number 3, and she's awful. She's awful. She's just, she's not listening to him. She's not intuitive. She spent 20 minutes, I don't even know doing what. Neither one of us were feeling it. The good news was, when he came out of the hospital, we went to a program called DBT. So they recommend this program called DBT. It's dialectical behavioral therapy. And it's a 10-week program, 3.5 hours a night, 3 days a week. And he never missed one. He worked so hard at that program. And I would go with him on Wednesday nights, and we do, parent-child stuff. And he learned a lot of coping mechanisms at that program. It was wonderful. And he was seeing a therapist there at that same, called Doorways, is the place that we went. He was seeing a therapist at that same place, and she was wonderful as well. But his meds still weren't, we still couldn't figure out what was going on with his meds. We finally I never got rid of that first appointment for that highly recommended psychiatric provider in May. So it was starting to come up on May, and I knew that that would be the next appointment. I was not going to go to our third provider. During DPT, he learned to create a life worth living. That was one of the coping mechanisms that he had learned, amongst many others. And finally in March, he felt like he was ready to go back to school part-time. So he did. He went back to school part-time. Although let me tell you, before that, when he got out of that hospital after 2 weeks, it took him 3 days to tell me that when he turned on his phone, he did not have one text message, no voicemails, nobody had said a word, like he didn't exist. People were calling me. I don't think it's because nobody cared. I think people don't know what to say. And I had so many texts and phone calls, and everybody was reaching out to me, but nobody said anything at all to Zachary. And it kind of sent him back into a tailspin a bit. But he went to DBT, and we worked a lot on his ability to care and what to expect from others, and why he's not feeling like he's getting it back. But again, so he was able to go back to school part-time. He was very worried about going back to school. When he went back to school, again, he felt like nobody even noticed he was gone. He was taking a confirmation class at our synagogue, and he went back to that confirmation class, small group of kids that he'd been with since preschool, and nobody said, "Hey, I'm so glad you're back." They just pretended like he'd always been there, and he really felt invisible. And I don't think it's because people don't care. Kids don't know what to say. They just don't know what to say. So he created this life worth living, and he created a business called Perfect Walker and Pet Sitting. And he combined his love of animals and his entrepreneurship, and he had this awesome business. And we were boarding dogs, and he was walking dogs, and helping people who were out of town watching their cats and their dogs, and he had people working for him, and he was really, advertising. He had more followers than Kim the Corner still does. He was on Nextdoor.com. He was just all over the place and loving it, and he started to really feel good. So we went to see that fourth provider now in May, and she felt like she should up his antidepressants just a little bit more. So he was on a pretty high dose now of antidepressants, and kind of running around and feeling pretty good about his graduating from confirmation class, and they let him out of DBT. He had graduated that, and he was feeling pretty good. But he started to be a little too much on the upswing. And at the end of May, he called me and he said, "Mom, something's wrong again. I think I'm manic. I think I'm manic. I can't stop spending money. My dreams are vivid. My thoughts are racing. I just can't. I can't stay still. I can't sleep. I'm mad. I know it. I'm manic. I looked it up on bipolar." So I called his psychiatric provider, that fourth one, and his psychologist, and we went to see both of them together the next day. And the psychiatric provider, who was a nurse practitioner, by the way, so she was not a psychiatrist. She was not gone to med school, but she was very highly, very, very highly recommended. But anyway, he said, something's wrong. Something's wrong. And she said, perhaps you need a mood stabilizer, but let's wait a couple weeks. We didn't have a couple weeks. A couple weeks later, and it kept getting worse. A couple of weeks later, he was taking care of someone's cats who was out of town. They were in Minnesota, and he'd been taking care of these cats for a couple of weeks. And he had inadvertently that day locked a cat behind a door, and he had to break that door. And the woman that whose cats he was watching texted to say that she was coming home early. She'd gotten an early flight. And unbeknownst to me, he had been struggling all day to fix that door. He had gone back and forth to Home Depot, there were a bunch of receipts that I found. He had called a locksmith, but to no avail, he couldn't get that door fixed. And I texted him and I said, "What are you doing? You know, it's time to come home now." And he said, "I'm almost done here, I'm almost done, just cleaning up. She's coming home early, so I make sure everything looks good for her, and I'll be home." And about 20 minutes later, we all got a text saying, "Thank you for everything you've ever done for me. You've all been so wonderful to me. I love you all so much." And I was in my room, and my daughter was in the living room with a friend of hers, and we both jumped up and screamed. And I called him, and he answered the phone. And he said, "Hang up, I don't want you to hear this." And we got in the car, and by the time we got there, he was gone. He found a loaded gun in this woman's house. And he felt like he couldn't, a situation he just could not get out of. He was misdiagnosed. He was on the wrong medication. He did not want to die. So he was not depressed sitting in his room thinking of ways to kill himself. He tried all day long to fix that door. He had plans, we had places to go the next day. He panicked. He was not in his right mind, he was sick. He had mental illness, and you know, the system in Arizona is such that we had to go through 4 providers in 6 months. Nobody had him long enough to be able to diagnose him properly. He was on the wrong medication. Antidepressants in bipolar people will increase suicidal ideation, and we lost him to an illness. We lost him. It didn't. His course of treatment didn't work. Just like somebody with cancer. So now what? I find, at his funeral, I got up there and I told the same story because I felt like if he had died from cancer, I would have told the same story of the last few hours of his life. Or if he'd been hit by a car. It wasn't his fault, and it's not a stigma, and it's nothing to be ashamed of. But what do we do now? So now what do we do? So in the months and weeks and months following Zachary's death, we knew, those of us that loved him dearly, had to do something. That this could not happen again. We had to make sure that we changed the story for the next Kid in the Corner. And so, Kid in the Corner was born. And we are all about shattering that stigma by starting the conversations. That is what's so important. If it is mentionable, it is manageable. It's very important to be able to talk about suicide, to talk about mental illness, to make sure that kids know who to talk to make sure that they know who their strong people are, their safe people are. So we have a 3-pronged approach. Our charge, our mission, is to reach out to the kid in the corner, whoever that may be, to provide connection to community, to make sure that they're supported to and connected by community, and that they find a path of hope and positivity. And we do that with a 3-pronged approach. So the first is to educate and spread awareness. So we go into schools and we talk. We talk to kids as young as 5th and 6th grade. We've been to about 10 schools now. We've helped start a couple of clubs in schools. We've talked to some teachers. We've done some teacher trainings about how to start those conversations. It's really important that kids know that it is okay to not be okay. They're not going to be okay every day. And mental illness is real. And sometimes it's clinical and sometimes it's situational. But it is real. From the earliest of ages, we tell our kids, they're scared, and we say, don't be scared. There's nothing to be scared of. or they say, you know, I'm this or that, and we tell them to suppress their feelings or not to feel what they're feeling, and yet we're their safe people. So they're like, okay, Mom's telling me not to feel that way, but I do feel that way. So we need to validate what our kids are saying and what our kids are feeling, and let them know that it is okay to feel like that, and help them figure out their path forward. I wished that Zachary had come to me before December to tell me that he wasn't feeling right, that he was sitting alone, that he felt like his friends were picking on him, and that we could have talked it through and maybe gotten him help a little bit earlier. The second prong is to promote contagious kindness. And you know, we go back to how kind Zachary was. He really was one of the kindest kids. But kindness was also his coping mechanism. It is proven to boost serotonin levels, and it's a win-win. So it makes you feel good, and it makes the next person feel good. And every month we have a different kindness theme. Every quarter we have big community kindness events that people can come and feel connected to community on just a kindness level. So it's not about a sport, and it's not about a talent, and it's not about anything other than giving back. And we, at our last big, huge rock painting event, we had over 100 people come to that. The way we started our rock painting is that a couple of months after Zach died, my daughter was out with a friend and having a horrible time, and you know, there's so much support for people who lose their kids and spouses, but I'll tell you, for siblings, not so much. And she was really struggling. And she walked out of the restaurant that she was at Tempe Marketplace, and she looked down and there was a rock, and it said, "You're stronger than you think, pass it on." And she still has that rock. She never passed it on, but she's probably made 100 more. And it's so nice to put inspirational messages, especially for kids, to write really positive things, and then you go and put them in the community, and then you go back and you see that they're gone, and that you know that you've made someone's day. So we hashtag the back of all our rocks, Kid in the Corner, and then people post them to our hashtags and tell us how it changed their day or it made their day. And it's really nice. And we usually do it after we present in the schools. And I'll walk around with kids who are just sitting looking at blank rocks, and I'll say, you know, what would you want to see on a rock? If you were walking down the street today, what message do you need? What would you like to see on a rock to you? And all of a sudden their rocks are covered. There's no space left. So they're not only writing to themselves, you know, or writing to others, but they're also writing to themselves. You know, it's okay for them to boost themselves and give themselves a pat on the back and let themselves know that that they're worth it, that they're beautiful, that they're strong, that they're amazing, and that their life is meant to be lived. So that's kindness. And then we connect kids to community and community to appropriate resources. So we have an amazing resource page on our website. It's great. And there's all kinds of resources. I wish I'd had this when Zach was suffering. But the other thing we do also is everybody has in their packets, of course I didn't keep that one up for myself, but let me use yours. And I'll talk about the penny pledge in a minute, but on the back of your penny pledge cards are resources, community resources, that we give to every kid. And there's hotlines and warm lines. Kids can keep them in their wallets and their IDs by their bedside table, so that they always have some place to reach out to. There are hotlines and warm lines. There are texting lines. And these resources are also really great for kids who have friends that tell them that they're struggling, because they can use these hotlines and warm lines to ask for advice on how to help their friends. So it's good resources for every single kid and parent. So we have those. The Penny Pledge is one of the cornerstones of our organization. When before Zach died, he was a big coin collector. He has a huge coin collection. And one of his specialties was pennies. He loved pennies. And after he died, my son Jacob and some of his friends sat around our dining room table, and they were just, you know, kind of picking through all Zach's pennies and looking for the ones for the year that he was born. And one of the kids went home and drilled holes in them, and we all started wearing pennies to remind us to live our life like Zach did in kindness. And it's become so much more than that. By wearing our pennies, it's a physical reminder to us to reach out to people, to take care of ourselves, and to be safe people for other people to talk to. So everybody has a penny in their folders, and I do this with all the kids. I tell them that they don't have to commit to taking the penny pledge, but if they do commit to taking the penny pledge, they need to take it seriously. So if you want to take the penny pledge with me, raise your hand. I pledge to reach out to the kid in the corner. Say hi, smile, ask where they've been. I pledge to take care of my own mental health. To know that it is okay to not be okay. And that it is a strength to ask for help. And I pledge to wear my penny proudly. So that other people know that I'm a safe and caring person to talk to. And kids put these pennies on their backpacks. They'll put them in their IDs, on their keychains, by their bed, hanging from their rearview mirrors. But it is a personal call to action to make sure that if you see somebody who looks down, or somebody that's new, or somebody who moved in next door, or a kid who is exhibiting different behavior, just say hi or smile. You don't have to be their best friend. But by acknowledging people, acknowledging humans, looking up from your phone and saying hi, you have no idea what that can do to change somebody's day or even life. When I think about how often Zachary felt alone, not because people didn't care about him, because I'll tell you something, all his friends and all those kids from youth group have since reached out to me multiple times about how much they regret never reaching out, how much they regret never saying anything to him at all, because they just didn't know what to say. So it's helping these kids have those conversations. It also reminds kids to know what to do when they're not feeling okay, to make sure that they understand that they're not going to be okay every day. They're not. They're going to have bad days. And what do you do when you have a bad day? Who is your safe person to talk to? What are your coping mechanisms? What do you do to take care of yourself? And when it starts to get worse or it seems like it's different, what's your next step? And then to wear it so that other people know that if I'm wearing a penny, you can always come to me. I will talk to you, I will listen to you. I'm not a mental health provider, but I will be a friend. I will absolutely be there and listen to you. And the stories that we've heard, I think there's some testimonies in your packets too, stories that we've heard of what the Penny Pledge has done, how kids have responded, and what they have, what action they've taken as a result of it is really, really huge. So we do that. So there's a few things that you can do to get involved. You can follow us on social media. We're going to paint some kindness rocks here. You can get involved in one of our kindness programs. Invite us to your school. You can donate on the website, join a committee. We have lots of committees. One thing that we do have, I just wanted to mention, was we have a youth leadership board now, which is a great group of about 10 kids from around the valley who have come together to want to make change in their communities, in their schools, in their own lives. And we meet once every other week. I think our youngest is in 8th grade and our oldest is a year out of high school. So it's a good, diverse group of kids. Tomorrow night, as a kindness activity, we're going to the Halley Women's Shelter. We've bought 130 dollar store boxes of candy, and we made 130 cards. And these kids who might otherwise be at home feeling down because they don't have boyfriends or girlfriends are going to walk into that shelter and hand all these homeless women boxes of candy. So when you're kind, it's a coping mechanism. It helps you and it helps the other person. So, on our website, we have different ideas for monthly kindness. Every month, like I said, is a different theme, but there are ways to cope with different situations. So our youth group is going to do that tomorrow night, and they're really, really excited about it. March 10th, we're going to Amy's Farm, which is a wonderful animal sanctuary. And for people who like animals and kids that like animals, we'll be able to go and I think you can pay $1 and hug a cow or feed the pigs or, all kinds of stuff like that. So that's a really good one. In June, we do what's called Zack packs. Last year, we filled 257 bags for homeless people. And it was actually something that I used to do with my kids all the time. And we just take those bags and we drive around, drive around the valley, kind of under the freeways and stuff like that, and hand out bags. And it's such a great feeling to be able to do something like that. And then in September, we do a big rock painting thing. And like I said, there's little ones in between. We do lots of little ones in between as well. But, it's something to do at home with your family. We're going to do it at Desert Springs Elementary School next year. We're going to do a sustainable curriculum there where we do a once-a-month Kid in the Corner Day. And we talk about tools. We talk about how we can make a change. We talk about what kind of obstacles we're seeing, and then some type of kindness project as well. So it's always about learning, experiencing, and kindness. Let's see, what else? We're creating a parenting series where we will put together all the information that we've learned from our youth group and from some other groups as well about what your kids want you to know, why they're not getting help, what they're afraid of, what they're dealing with, what their issues are. The second part of the series will be mental health first aid. We're partnering with a couple of people to provide mental health first aid, so what to look for in your child. And the last part of the parenting series will be how to create a stigma-free environment for your child. So how to start those conversations. And that's it. Anybody have any questions, anything they want to? Yes?
Francine, first, thank you. Wow, I'm almost speechless. I don't know about you guys. So,
Thank you.
yeah.